Welcome to Phenomenon Radio, the show that covers thought-provoking breakthroughs in the fields of UAP UFOs to discover fascinating truths, first-hand accounts, and investigative insights into the expanding confluence of physical and mental exposure to this worldwide phenomenon. Hosted by Emmy award-winning investigative journalists, Earthfiles reporter and editor, Linda Moulton Howe, and world-renowned experiencer of the 1980 Rendlesham Bentwaters incident, John Burroughs. And now, leading off tonight's program, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Calvin Parker was born on November 2nd, 1954 in Seminole, Texas. By age 3, his parents moved to the Laurel, Mississippi region about 110 miles northwest of Pascagoula. Calvin's father worked for the Atomic Energy Commission, also known as the AEC. His work was to drill test holes to detonate nuclear bomb devices deep underground. Calvin's father also worked in Groom Lake, Nevada at Area 51. His father's Mississippi work was for Project Dribble. In 1964, 2 nuclear bombs were detonated beneath Hattiesburg, Mississippi, down a 3,000-foot deep shaft drilled into a reservoir of ancient salt called the Tatum Salt Dome. Those were the early days of the nuclear test ban, and the United States was trying to figure out if other nations could secretly explode bombs that seismographs would not catch from deep underground tests. After one of those underground atomic bomb explosions, a crew lowered a TV camera into the underground crater. It measured more than 100 feet in diameter, and 3 months later, the air in that nuclear bomb test hole under Hattiesburg was still 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of the United States never knew there had ever been nuclear testing in America's Deep South, but Calvin Parker's father was there. At age 18, Calvin dropped out of high school in Laurel and took a job building shrimp boats in Pascagoula at the F.B. Walker & Son shipyard. Nearby was another Ingalls shipyard that built nuclear submarines and battleships for the U.S. Navy. National security concerns in the waters around both of those shipyards were serious enough to enforce a safety zone on the east bank of the Pascagoula River. Even today, if you get too close to the Walker shipyard in Pascagoula, patrol boats will come quickly and push you back. By October of 1973, Calvin Parker had rented a room from one of his shipyard colleagues named Charles Hickson. Hickson, at age 42, was like a mentor to teenager Calvin. October 11th, 1973, it turned out to be a really hot day in Pascagoula, maybe 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Calvin and Charles wanted to go fishing after work, but young Calvin didn't have any fishing equipment, so Charles Hickson loaned him some. The two set off around 5:30 p.m. to go to an old abandoned shipyard called Shaw Peters that had a grain elevator to unload ships into silos. That's where grain would fall off the elevators into the river, and that attracted fish. In its old and dilapidated age, the Shaw shipyard didn't build ships anymore, and a lot of trash had accumulated from periodic floods and local residents on the ground right down to the Pascagoula River. Calvin estimates that he and Charlie had to walk about 300 feet through garbage bags to reach Shaw's old steel pier above the water. And then they found an old log and dragged it on to the pier to sit and fish. Then they both saw blue light reflecting from the water in front of them, from something behind them. What happened next is what Calvin Parker begged Charlie Hickson to never talk about. But later, Charles Hickson would talk about what happened that night, and newspaper stories emerged around the world. Hickson would also write a book and did media interviews until he died September 9th, 2011, near age 80. After this short break, Phenomena Radio returns with Calvin Parker, who in 2018 is talking for the first time in 45 years since that October 11th, 1973 night. He has also produced a new book released in July 2018 that is the first full public account Calvin has ever given about his and Charles Hickson's abduction by non-humans while they were fishing off that old shipyard pier. The title is Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, My Story, available at Amazon.com. What Calvin remembers includes 3 large robotic entities and a small female, non-human, that communicated with him telepathically.
You're listening to Phenomenon Radio Live. You're locked in to KGRA-DB with Bentwater's experiencer John Burroughs, an Emmy award-winning investigative journalist, and Earthfiles reporter and editor Linda Moulton Howe. Tonight's special guest, Calvin Parker, is waiting to join the show right after these messages. Stay with us.
Welcome to Phenomenon Radio, Calvin Parker. It is really wonderful to have you join John Burroughs and me today.
It is my pleasure to be able to join y'all and get out and share the words and some of the things that I went through on this. I know it's kind of unbelievable to a lot of people, but I think before the show's over, they might have an open mind.
And I know that there are so many people out there that have had maybe facets, pieces of what you and Charles experienced. And I wonder if you can now take us back to October 11th, 1973. It's early evening when you and Charles Hickson had dropped your fishing lines into the Pascagoula River from that old steel pier. And both of you suddenly see out on the water in front of you reflections that reminded you of a blue sky but a little bit darker, and it's reflecting from something behind you. Can you start there and give us all of the details that you remember as it unfolded?
I can. I remember when we was sitting on the pier, the first thing I was doing, there was a Coast Guard ship straight across the river on the other side. And in my mind, I was thinking, I wonder how something as heavy as what this is, made out of steel, can float, because they're heavy. So as I was thinking that, I was looking at this boat, and I seen kind of a reflection off the boat and the water of a blue, hazy light. And I guess Charlie seen it almost the same time I did. So I stood up and I turned around and looked, and then almost immediately they must have opened the door or thrown a light in our face or something, because the light got really bright. I mean, almost where you couldn't stand it in your eyes. You had to kind of squinch them a little bit. And to let everybody know about what that is, I don't know if they used to be around welding or not. But if you weld, you got an arc off your welder, and you have to put a shield on to keep your eyes from getting burned up. So that's what it kind of reminded me of. I personally thought it was the law to get us to move a car because we was trespassing on private property. There were no signs there or anything. But I said, told Charlie, I said, the law's here to make us move. And then that's when the blue lights hit. I meant the bright light. And we couldn't make the figures out. I couldn't make the figures out, and I'm not speaking for Charlie because I never really talked to Charlie about this. But I couldn't make the figures out that was coming, but I seen three bulky figures about halfway between where I was parked and where I was standing, and my car was parked kind of parallel with the craft that they was in. And then it got to where I can make them out. But I noticed where we had trouble walking through all the trash and the debris and the grass, they seemed to just be gliding. And I was thinking, how in the world are they getting on top of that? But come to find out, they was floating about 2 foot off the ground. So I didn't know what to think to start with. It scared me, and I kind of looked to each side because I was hunting a place to run. Well, the river was real swift and running hard in the front, a lot of debris in the water. And on each side of me, there was debris in the water, and it was a lot of water, so I didn't have a choice. I had to run back to the car through that mess and go right to where they was coming from, or just stay there and take it like a man. So I, without thinking, I just stood there because that's all I could do. There was nowhere to go or nothing to do.
And Calvin, can you describe what you could see of the craft that they came in? How big it was and all of that?
I estimating now, I don't have an exact size, but I figured about 80 foot from what I seen at this time with the lights being bright and all. And kind of like a football in a way. I drawed a picture of it at one time. I know the picture's not here. I should have seen it, but it's kind of a oblong shape, and in the front of it, it's got two little window-looking deals, portholes. So it could have been like a submarine or something. And I'll get into that later on, why I think it could be anything. It could go anywhere.
Well, and isn't this what was, we'll say, blasting out that sort of sky blue light that you realized it had to be coming from that big craft, and then it is on that craft that something opened where the big light came, and that's how you saw these three football field, like you said, football player-sized entities? It
is. I figure it's probably a door that was sliding open, because it wasn't one that physically opened, because I was looking for that when I come, that swung on hinges. So the door just kind of appeared and went back. And I noticed the lights was coming from the inside of the craft. And when I got in the craft, let me get back to, they was floating down about halfway down. I noticed it was three of them. So two of them went toward Charlie, and one of them went to myself. And they reached out and they grabbed me by the arm, by the left arm. And as soon as they did, I immediately was relaxed. And I immediately floated. I figured it'd break your arm if they picked you up by it or something, because we're dead weight. But it's just like I was tied to a bunch of helium balloons and floated up a little bit and level with where they were. And we just glided right across the grass. I wasn't able to turn or twist or move or fight or resist. I was just in a fixed position, facing toward the craft, and we was floating across the grass that we fought so hard to get across to go fishing there. And there wasn't no fear then. So later on, I found out they could have gave me an injection. I think they might have of some kind to settle me down. But we was floating toward the craft and went in the craft, and that's when I realized I could see the walls, and the illumination of the lights was coming out of the walls. There wasn't no light fixtures or anything inside that I could see.
So the walls were glowing.
The walls was glowing bright.
And at that point, Calvin, could you see with your eyes Charles Hickson?
No, ma'am, I couldn't.
What do you think happened? Were you paralyzed at that time and you couldn't move your head?
I was paralyzed. The only thing I could do was just look straight ahead. But I could see, I had my thoughts about me, and I could see straight ahead of me. And I figured they had taken Charlie to a different place in the ship, because when I went in, we immediately went to the left and then turned right again. And that was a little room in there that they had put me into there. And the big ugly one, as I call him, or the big bulky or army or whatever he is, he took me and placed me on a table, but I didn't see a table. I couldn't feel a table, but I was at about a 45-degree angle, suspended in air there. And that's when it started getting a little strange. There's something that come out of the ceiling about the size of a deck of cards, and it comes straight down like it was at the center of my forehead, and it went to my right ear, and it clicked, went behind my head and clicked, to my left ear and clicked, and then back up to the front and disappeared back up in the ceiling. So I figured it was something. Of course, I didn't know what an MRI was back then, but recently being in the hospital, I had one, and that's what it kind of reminded me of.
An MRI? That was, and it was going around your head.
Right. It was just circling, and then it went right back up in the ceiling. And, of course, I remember when I was in the hospital, and it's kind of scary then, because when I was in the hospital, they said, look, lay still, don't move. And that's what I had to do in there because I couldn't move. So I figured they might have gave me some kind of injection so I wouldn't move.
Mm-hmm.
So when this thing went back up in the ceiling, the big robotic-looking creature, he left out the door that he brought me into, and he went, and I don't know if he left the craft or maybe he just went and somewhere else or something, but he acted like he was under the control of something else. Then this, what I call a female creature, now it might have been male, I don't know, no way to distinguish. It was just kind of small and feminine looking, and I just called it a female because it reminded me of a female. You couldn't see any breast or any outlines of anything else. So she came in and grabbed me with one of her hands, and she started pulling the skin on my face, opening, putting her fingers down my mouth and looking in my mouth, and giving me what I call some kind of examination, as close as what she could. And then she turned around, and it scared me. And I was thinking to myself at that moment, I guess maybe the drug was wearing off, I could probably grab her around the neck and get the hell out of there and take her with me. But it didn't work. She just looked at me, and I knew exactly what she was thinking. She said, do not panic. We're not going to hurt you. Or maybe not just in words, but she was thinking, and I figured it was telepathically telling me they weren't going to hurt us or nothing. So
Cal,
it kind of...
What were her eyes like?
She had real small eyes, if I could tell. I really couldn't tell that much about her face because of the way I was laying, looking straight up. And the bright lights in there was so bright that it still just we were still kind of blinded, or I was, while we was in there. You could just kind of see the shadows of things. But, I wasn't afraid of her after she told me not to. I don't know why. I should have been. And then I do know that I seen the figure kind of roll my eyes to the side. I still couldn't turn my head, but I just rolled my eyes to the side, and I looked, and she went into another room. Now, I'd never seen a door that she went through, but I noticed she just walked over and kind of disappeared, so I figured she went into another room. And then that big ugly one come back in there and grabbed me by the arm. It was the same thing. The second he grabbed me, I immediately floated up off the table, and he turned, or it turned, or whatever it was, floated us out the door, back to the riverbank, exactly where they had picked us up on the pier, with the exception, I was facing the water, and when he set me down, my arms were stretched out over the water, toward the water, And I was kind of paralyzed like that for a second until I heard Charlie saying, Calvin, 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 you okay, son? And I came to my senses. And when I did, kind of to my senses, that was enough time that I could turn around and see the lights just disappeared. So I figured they closed the doors. And this thing picked straight up, and it made a little zipping noise. It went zzz, and just disappeared. So
now, Calvin, one of the most fascinating parts of your story is what happened with the female on that big craft. Can you go into more of the telepathy and the exchanges that you had in which you yourself began to feel that she was evil?
Well, I did hear when they was in there together, and this question come up before, did they communicate with each other? And I think they did with kind of a clicking noise, like click, 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 and he would turn and leave. So I don't think it was nothing mental with them. I think it was some kind of noise that they had. But when she was there, you could just feel like you was an experiment. Like, you know, we experiment with animals and things here on this earth. And I felt like I was in one of their experimental cages there, and she was checking me out, or maybe had been there before and looking for something, some kind of maybe implant or something to keep up with me. But it's just like she knew everything I was thinking, and when she wanted me to, I could hear what she was thinking. And, of course, I don't think they really wanted you scared, not at the time, because, well, she told me she didn't, so I don't know. She might have wanted me to. I'd rather think that, you know, she said that to calm me down, and they let me live through it.
Well, a Bud Hopkins hypnosis transcript was a revelation to me. I did not know that he had done a hypnosis with you. And there is a section that is extraordinary. I printed out from your book so that I could explain to people that if you were printing out from your book, that this section that goes into this exchange with the female begins around page 384. And this is in your new book. And you talk about, this is now Hypnosis with Bud. And this hypnosis session with Bud was done how long after October 11th, 1973?
This was in the 90s, I think 93.
Okay, that's what I thought. It was about 10 years later.
Yes, ma'am.
And it is an extraordinary hypnosis session. And you say, I see a woman on the ship, and she's mad. I can read her thoughts, and I'm reading her thoughts because she wants to kill me. And she becomes angry. You're paralyzed. And this is a quote, and she scratched me around the eyes, fingernails, and I can't move, and they are ripping my eyes, the fingernails, and she's still ripping my eyes, and all I can think of was, I'll get to where I can move again. And you're saying that you can't even blink your eyes. My eyelids, eyebrows, there's blood coming from them. Some kind of light, a strong white light, appears. And then she is there and just talked to me, but she wasn't moving her mouth. This is telepathy. And then you go into, she's pulling thoughts out of my head. She tells me that to me, you're not going to be in any danger to us. And you think, who is us?
Us.
Who is she referring to that is the us of her? And then you say, This is all under hypnosis in the transcript. You're talking out loud and Bud is recording. Who is us? She said to me, you will no longer be a threat. I didn't know I was a threat to start with, but she can bet that I will be a threat from now on. She's evil. She is really evil, and I can see destruction. I am able to see things that I have never seen before. Before we go into this next section, in my reading that part from Bud Hopkins' hypnosis session, do you remember that and more details in your own mind and soul about why you felt she was evil and talking about you as a threat to them?
Let me tell a little story here that kind of cleared up a little bit. I didn't even, to start with, when Bud hypnotized me, he put a post-hypnotic suggestion in my head that I wouldn't remember this until I could handle it and go in, because it scared Bud too, I'll be honest with you, because he was a different man after this hypnosis. And I had took a good friend in the ship with me, and he was a trustworthy, good friend and acquaintance that I know, and I'm not going to call his name, but he was in the medical industry and helped build medical equipment. So he went in with me so I could keep things straight, because I didn't want somebody putting something in my head that wasn't supposed to be there. But yeah, I went up before Bud hypnotized me. There's a place, and I pulled it up on the internet the other day, and I felt like somebody asked me, what do you think they were? And I said, I think they was demons. I think they was here to hurt us. And I just got started going on in like a preaching mode. And of course, a lot of people think they're here to help us, and they might be. I don't know if they was here to hurt us or help us, but I know what they did to me. And I mean, they pure damn torture when it came to that. And I didn't want to talk about it or tell nobody. I didn't want nobody to know, because I figured that was pretty much the end of everything.
And Calvin, she cut your right hand, and you could hear blood dripping. Yeah,
and I actually had a scar there. Now, when I went to the doctor, the examination room the next day, I was scratched and bruised up. Most of my scratches and cuts was on the inside, like of my mouth and my nose, and my eyes, and not too much on the outside, but there were some. So, that was a pretty good reason not to want to talk about it right there.
Right, and do you remember seeing in your paralyzed state inside of that craft with the female or whatever she was, or whatever it was, of you're concentrating on the fact that there was that dripping sound, like water dripping from a roof onto a floor, and then somehow, that's what I'm curious, how did you see, sense, get an image in your mind that it was blood dripping from your own hand?
It just, at one time, I think that I was connected with her. For some reason, she might have been shooting thoughts into my head and all, but at one time, I think I was connected with her and able to kind of read her brain too, read her chain of thoughts and all. And that's probably, I was probably looking through her eyes, from my eyes through her eyes, and seeing that.
And the question then would be, we know that the harvest of genetic material, whether it's sperm or eggs, has been a huge part of the human abduction syndrome for decades. And what went through my mind is that the blood itself might have been a harvest for some reason, and wondered if you ever got any insight about their taking blood from your hand for any specific purpose.
No, I don't know why they did it, but they did take some. So, I know it was something down there. If it was just hitting the floor, I still got that memory in my mind, and it's like a sink dripping into a glass where the glass was filling up, and you could hear it getting fuller and fuller as it dripped.
Right.
So if it had been just dripping out on the floor, I wouldn't have been, filling nothing up. And I was thinking to myself, it's got to be an easier way to do this than that. And there's one thing that really didn't come up in all that. And, I mentioned the other day, Bud put this thing in my mind not to let me remember it too fast to protect me. Bud was a real great gentleman, and I thought the world of him. And the guy that was in there with us, it was the same way. It was him and his wife. But he done that to protect me, but he also put a thing in there that as I could remember it and it wouldn't influence me or really wouldn't bother me, then let me remember it and go on. So I tried not to get too far into his tapes. I have an actual disc and all of it. So I try not to get too far in there because I don't want to remember it too fast, but I do want to remember all of it. And I had got to that point, and, there's things that I remembered that I wish Bud was still here, that I would love to go back over it with him.
Well, let's transition from what seems like a terrible scene, and I'm asking the questions trying to see if you feel that it was literally occurring as it is in the hypnosis, or it was theatrical production, or whatever it was. But we've now established you had a scar and that there was blood taken from you, and you had the sense that she was evil. Now, this is the maybe redeeming part of everything that happened to you. Because the next thing is, you're saying under hypnosis to Bud, she's evil. She's really evil. I can see destruction. I'm able to see things that I've never seen before. And Bud says, what are you seeing? And you said, another light shines on me, and it's like it's only, now it's beautiful. And she, the female who took the blood and scratched your eyes, she's afraid of this light. She's really afraid of this light. She's turning her head now. She's getting back into the corner and trying to get at the door where this light is shining on me. And through this light, I can see things, current things, the past. I know things that I have never known. It is like sitting back and watching a movie. And we have fires here. And I'm having trouble with the fire smoke. Uh-huh. It's like sitting back and watching a movie, and we've been able to see into the future through this light. Do you remember that? And can you talk to us about what you were seeing suddenly in the presence of this light that was past and present and future?
Yeah, I think God actually intervened in there. I had like an angel intervene in that. And like I say, I believe that we was more like experiments to this race here. You have different races on Earth, and some are cruel and mean, some are good and wholesome, and some want what's best for the world, and some can't stand the world and just want to blow it up and kill their own self. And it's the same way with these other planets. And I just happen to have, I think, a set of beings get a hold of me that was kind of evil, and maybe the good ones had come in and intervened and showed me that things was going to be good, but we had to go through a dramatic change for it to be good. And that's a lot of the reason I wanted to write this book, was to get their attention about the change. I see, people starving, and somebody asked me the other day if you could suggest to anybody what we need to do. Well, it's easy. All we need to do is get along. And I said, I would plant a garden, just jokingly said it. but I was more or less serious. You need people are lazy bums now, a lot of them, and I know this is going to get me a lot of hate mail, but I don't care. Basically, the human race has got dependent on machines, mechanical. They don't know what it is to go out and earn a living by the sweat of their brow anymore, or to work and make an honest living. They want to sit on a damn cell phone and be rude in restaurants and be rude in hospitals and sit there and text and click each other and call each other. For an example, me and my wife went out to eat the other day, and we was going to sit down and enjoy a good meal, and this man sitting over there on a cell phone, he was talking where half the restaurant could hear him. And I just wanted to get up and bang his head up against that counter and say, "Shut up, guy." But we didn't. We sat there patiently. But, you know, it's...
And, Cal, this is exactly reflected in this 1993 hypnosis session with Bud. You say, with the light, you're describing the light as, quote, "the best feeling I ever had in my life." And that you think you've died and gone to heaven. The light is so wonderful. And then you say that you're having an out-of-body experience. I must go back to my body now. I must. And now I'm back in my body in a standing position. It is not right to hate your fellow man, but I hate what is going on in the world. And what she is afraid of, and I see the destruction. I see the world being changed for what it's like. And here is a part that dovetails into my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, in which I have a 100-page section from abductees about a technology they refer to as the resurrection technology, the creation of rapid cycle cloned bodies that don't have to go through a baby or adolescent stage. By taking genetic material, these non-humans can make full adult bodies that are in tubes, kept alive by light. And here you are in 1993 telling Bud Hopkins, I see them possessing bodies, taking them over, and I have a power to fight it. Calvin, what is that power you have to fight it?
If I had to really sit down and believe it, I think it would be knowledge. And it's just, I feel like sooner or later, I've been kept alive for a reason. I had a stroke in 2010, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't do nothing but just look at the ceiling. And I kept on and on. I mean, I couldn't even feed myself. And then I come out of that, and then not too long after that, I had my first open heart surgery. Well, I died in there, and I come right back. I tricked them. They had already called my wife, said, you know, we got some bad news. You need to come to the hospital and talk to us. Well, I had died then, but I thank God to modern medicine, I guess, and God, they brought me back around. And then the other part where they tried to get me again, and I feel like this is evil trying to get me before I figure out the truth about all this. You know, I think there's something wanting me to die. I believe I got like I told that reporter, I got an expiration date, and it's getting close. I just got to figure out, I can't leave this world without knowing that it's going to be okay. That's just the way I am, because I love the people on this planet, and I love the world, and I just wish we could change them where they could all get along and start by getting rid of all the politicians.
Well, in your hypnosis session with Bud, you refer to, in this beautiful light, the light that shows up and seems to terrify the telepathic female, that your soul, or you sense that your soul is either trying to leave your body, something is happening that you interpret that your soul is leaving, and then something shows up You think it's in the angel category, and that you feel your own soul being pulled back into your body on that craft.
And that's what I said. I really do think, and I know it's a lot of people that don't believe or anything, and that's fine with me. I don't care. But I really do think that there's a purpose for me to keep going. It would have been so much easier for me to just give up and die and let it be over with, because, I know it's a God, and I know that I'm going to heaven because I love everybody, and I try to do what's right. But you
said in the hypnosis, I have the power, and I have to go back, meaning to Earth, and I have to fight her and what she represents. What does that mean to you now?
It means I feel like that I'm not the only one, that there's more people that has been experimented on. I feel kind of like, how they used to experiment with rabbits and dogs and everything else. I think that's the phase that a lot of people's been going through, and they're trying to figure out what makes us tick. But in order to do that, we learn by our experiences, and we know how to fight against it. And we're not supposed to know how the things is going to end. But I can't let people create their own destiny by destroying the earth and being lazy and not working. And I don't know about where y'all live, but anywhere you want to walk out here within a mile of the house, you could probably get all the drugs you wanted, and it's just not right. People destroying themselves.
Well, whatever was in this 80-foot football field-shaped craft, you were controlled by the large, huge, big-shouldered football player type that are sketched with the points coming around like they didn't have a face, and they were more like big, huge robots under the control of something. And then there was the confusing small body that might have been female who physically interacted with you. Can you think back? You're put back by those big ones, and you have your arms stretched out in front of you. When did you then next see Charles Hickson, and when did you discover that the passenger window on your car was broken? Can you go back to those first moments when you are now out of the craft?
I can. Like I say, my hands were stretched out in front of me, and immediately I heard Charlie say, Calvin, you okay, son? You okay? And I turned around, and that's when the craft picked up. So Charlie and I, he said, let's sit down here for a minute. You look like hell. So I did. We sat down on a log that we had pulled up on the pier, and we talked for just a second. Now, we didn't talk about what happened to us in there or anything. I said, Charlie, take me for my word, don't tell nobody this. Do not tell anybody. I'm going to deny it if you do. He said, I got to tell somebody. I said, well, let's go to the car and get out of here. And I was ready to leave by then. So we walked back the 300 foot back to the car through all this debris and nasty marsh and things like that. We got to the car, and I noticed on the passenger side, as we was walking up, I was kind of walk up to it, the window was just shattered in little bitty pieces, but it was all in a place. So I figured that was safety glass and probably had that plastic in it to hold it in place. But that window, the windows on that side was shattered. And Charlie...
which is very interesting about what kind of frequencies were emitted from that UFO that caused the window to shatter.
Well, and I kind of looked for a debris field just real quickly, glanced around before anything disappeared. And I hate I didn't go back at night. And I hate the sheriff department didn't investigate it as good as what they could have. They could have went back down there with us, and we could have looked around. But it was next couple of days before I even made it back down to the site and looked. but I was looking for maybe it might have took off and blowed something through the window, but I'm convinced it didn't do that because there was nothing inside the car, or I couldn't see anything on the outside that might have hit it. It just had to be the sound of it taking off, and it was so fast that it shattered them.
Well, you wrote in the book that there was a scratch on that car door. What was the scratch like?
It was just looked like somebody took a nail and walked down the side of it. And it hadn't been there. That was a brand new car. I had just bought the car. I didn't have 20,000 miles on it.
Wow.
Of course, back in, you put 80,000 miles on a car and they was wore out. But that was low mileage. And when we got into strange thing, when we got in to crank the car to leave, we never did get it cranked. It took 10, 15 minutes. And I figured, I said, well, and this is one thing that's bothered me. I said, well, the battery will be run down in a second. But it was like the battery wouldn't run out of energy in it.
And if there were a strong electromagnetic field from that craft, it might have had some impact on the car that we don't understand. But the bottom line here is that after this experience with these strange entities, you are back in the matter world, and there's clear physical evidence of odd damage to your car.
Exactly. And I don't know. I might even still have the car till it died. Well, I know that's probably not. He probably had it crushed. But when we got the car running, it wouldn't run right. I mean, it just run real raggedy. But still, we made it to a little store with it, and I pulled up and killed it. And Charlie says, well, I'm fixing to make a phone call. Back in, we didn't have cell phones. So he had to look for some dimes, and he went and called the Keesler Air Force Base. And they told him there, well, we don't investigate anything like this anymore. We shut down Project Blue Book, so you need to call the local authorities. So that's what he did. He called the sheriff department, the local authorities, and they said, y'all stay where you are, don't move. Stay right there. And it wasn't but just a minute until, I say 10 minutes, and they pulled up in a patrol car, and one of them come to my door, one went to Charlie's, and they just looked in the windows, then told me to step out, and I don't know what they told him, but I'm sure they did the same thing. And they started giving me what they call a field sobriety test to see if I'd been drinking. You jump up and down on one foot, you lean your head back and touch your nose and all that. Of course, I passed all that because they said, well, y'all follow us to the sheriff department. So we got in the car. It cranked right up then, and we followed them straight to the sheriff department. And they took us into separate rooms. So when they put us in different rooms, they had different deputies or detectives interrogating us. So they started interrogating us, and then they brought us back in one room together and put us in the same room. Now, little did I know that they had a tape recorder in this room, and that's where what they call the secret tape. I had no idea what a secret tape was until I heard it one day, and so they put the tape recorder.
The tape recorder was in a drawer, right, in that office, and the sheriff's office was used to secretly taping people in that room.
Right. That's my understanding. Like I say, I didn't even know they had it that night. Next thing I knew, I was reading about it in the newspaper.
And and up to that point, you had been begging Charles Hickson to not talk, right?
Begging him.
And you were, can you explain for an audience, we're going to be going to break here in just a couple of minutes, explain why it was that you felt, looking back now, that you felt desperate about staying quiet, but Charles Hickson wanted to talk. And then when we come back from this break, let's go into great detail into the secret tape and what happened on the secret tape. I've got the transcript in front of me. But right now, can you help us understand why? Because it's not a normal human reaction to not want to tell the whole world a big UFO just took us from the Pascagoula River. What was in your mind about why you felt desperate to keep Charlie Hickson from talking?
There was several things. I felt like I wasn't supposed to talk about it because I didn't know what we could do about it. And I'm the type person that likes to solve a problem, then go into the problem. And then another thing, I was going to get married in November, and I didn't want her family to find out about it because they'd think I was an idiot, and that would have put all that off. So it was several reasons there. I didn't feel like we needed to talk about it, but just a deep down feeling inside, no, you're not supposed to talk about this. All that.
And Cal, if I'm understanding, even in the car, even after the entities have brought you back, and you haven't even gotten to your car and you haven't even seen the window yet, that you're begging Charlie Hickson at that point to not talk.
Oh, we had a big conversation about that sitting down on the log on the pier. Charlie, we're not telling nobody. We're going to deny it. If it ever comes up, this didn't happen, and you're a damn liar if you said it did. But
what did he say to you?
We got to tell somebody. We got to let somebody know. I said, no, we don't. We don't need to let nobody know. Not right now. Let's see what happens, Charlie. No, we got to tell somebody. And that's when we left, and he called Kiesler. And when we left the sheriff department, I even told the sheriff, I said, look, Sheriff Diamond, I don't want nobody to know about this. Please don't tell the media or nobody. He said, well, we're not. We're professional here. We're not going to tell nobody. I said, well, please be professional. And what they should have done was go back and investigate the scene that night themselves, or took us with them and let us walk through all that. But they didn't do it.
You mean that the people, Kiesler, the sheriff's office, they did not go to the pier?
Not that I know of. Now, they might have went over there after we left and was going home, but I don't think they did. If they did, they never mentioned it. And we have one of the deputies that was on duty that night still works for the Jackson County Sheriff Department, and I hadn't been able to get a hold of him and talk to him, but I would personally want to go and talk to him. Of course, he was young then, and probably wouldn't know how to investigate something like that. Well, nobody knows how to investigate a UFO. And
but the idea that the Air Force and the sheriff having two men, one of which, Charles Hickson, is saying, we had a big UFO and we were taken, and you're trying not to talk, you would think that that law enforcement would have wanted to at least go to the scene, maybe even with you guys, as just a chain of custody about where things started.
Yeah, and they should have. And I hate it because they didn't. I should have insisted. But, as far as I know, they didn't, unless they went over there after we had left.
Well,
so,
I'm telling you, Calvin, one of the most interesting other parts of your book, beyond Bud's hypnosis session with you, is the secret tape of Chapter 5. And when we come back after this break, let's go into... I will share some of the excerpts, and you fill in with what happened and what happened thereafter you got out of that room.
Okay, sure will.
This 50-minute uninterrupted segment of Phenomenon Radio Live, broadcast exclusively on KGRA Radio, is brought to you by OnlineVibes.com, your personal connection to mind, body, and spirit, and they're committed to helping connect you with healing modalities that can manifest a true and healthy change in your life. Visit the website at onlinevibes.com. That's online, VIBEZ.com. Tonight's very honored and special guest, Calvin Parker, will join the show for hour 2 right after these messages. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Phenomenon Radio live exclusively on KGRA digital broadcast station, Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, before we can begin hour 2 of tonight's exceptional interview with Calvin Parker on Phenomenon Radio with John and Linda, it's time for the news, and it's brought to you all by Earthfiles.com. Here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Race. Well, the New York Times has highlighted UFOs again. It was in the Sunday, August 14th, 2018 edition, and they had a very long article, straightforward. There was no sarcasm, with lots of photographs about, quote, a group in Los Angeles that has attracted UFO enthusiasts from all over the world. They have formed together around the common question, what are these things in the sky exactly, and how can they know more about them? Close quote. Well, when the Times asked the group what they do to try to study UFOs, most said it has to do with meditation and consciousness. Well, quote, some say that they feel physical sensations when they do meditations to contact UFOs. As soon as someone in the group spots something, they yell to a man who has a telescope connected to a camera and a screen, and he records whatever happens in order to study later in video editing on a computer. Close quote. Their goal is to work harder at documenting what they see as evidence of UFOs in the sky, evidence that they say should keep that these are beings to the New York Times, and that the New York Times and other credible media should keep repeating to confirm we are not alone, and that fact should not be a secret. And that is a step to have within a few months, the New York Times treating a UFO phenomena like the FLIR infrared, and a group that is now trying to unite people around the world in trying to get hard evidence of UFOs in the sky and treating it straightforwardly. Also, this week, To the Stars has released a new web video about studying alleged materials from alleged UFO crashes. To the Stars says it is now, quote, they have a Rendlesham Forest sample of shavings with size on the order of 1 millimeter, close quote. And that is smaller than 1/16 of an inch. So it's small. Shavings. In addition, I know To the Stars also now has a small piece of bismuth and magnesium zinc layered metal, allegedly from the underside of a wedge-shaped UFO that crashed in New Mexico in 1947. I have been studying that same nano-layered metal since May of 1996, when Art Bell and I received some pieces from a U.S. Army sergeant left to him by his grandfather, who served in Army security at the time of the 1947 UFO crashes in New Mexico. I personally hand-delivered a piece of this layered metal to the STARS office in San Diego, California on Monday, August 6th. And I know one of the lab challenges will be to expose this layered metal to high terahertz frequencies to see if gravity can be affected, maybe even neutralized. More important news this week was on August 15th in the New York Times op-ed by Thomas Friedman. The title was, If Mother Nature Gets a Vote in 2020. He writes, what if all the extreme weather this year linked to global climate change gets even worse and more costly? If you look at all the destructive extreme weather buffeting the world this summer of 2018, and then Friedman lists what makes this year different from all previous years. Europe is baking in unrelenting heat. California is fighting the biggest wildfire it has ever seen. British Columbia in Canada has had 460 new wildfires break out in a single day. Sweden has terrible wild forest fires that are extending north into the Arctic Circle, where in August temperatures there have reached 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Japan has the heaviest rainfall ever recorded and the highest temperature ever recorded, 106 degrees Fahrenheit, in Kumagaya, northwest of Tokyo. Death Valley in California reached 127 degrees Fahrenheit, breaking its own heat record. Eastern Australia has the worst drought in decades, where a dairy farmer told the BBC last week, quote, "It's gotten to the point where it's cheaper to shoot our cows than it is to feed them," close quote. Why have wildfires in 2018 been so ferocious? Tune in to my Earthfiles website and YouTube channel for my latest upcoming interview with one of the world's most prominent atmospheric scientists, who says, quote, "In another 30 years, by 2050, the Earth is projected to have 9 billion some humans. With climate change of droughts, ferocious fires, intense rains, floods, islands and beaches going under the rising oceans, where will all the displaced people move to? Where will they get food, and where will they get water? And is that what humans will be fighting over for the rest of the 21st century?" Close quote. This is Linda Moulton Howe. Please stay tuned to Earthfiles news updates on KGRA Radio, and visit every day my science, environment, and real X-Files news website, earthfiles.com, for more on breaking stories about our universe, this solar system, and the planet we live on.
And that's the news, and it's brought to you every week right here on Phenomenon Radio by Earthfiles.com. All right, back to our interview with Calvin Parker. Linda?
Thanks, Race. And Calvin, before the break, we were introducing what is called the secret tape in chapter 5 of your book. And this is sort of a surprise to you and to Calvin, or you to Charlie, that you did not know you were being audio taped when you were in the sheriff's office. Can you take us back and set the scene a little bit about how they take you in there for the third time, this time because they want to tape you?
I can. When we got to the sheriff department, as I said, they put us in separate rooms, interrogated us. Then when they got through with about a 30-minute interrogation on both of us, they put us back in the same room. And they explained to us, or explained to me, I don't know what they explained to Charlie, if this is a hoax, y'all going to jail for a long time. I said, feller, I'd rather be in jail than where I was. And I had. So they put us in the same room. And I had no idea the tape was in there, and Charlie didn't either. I guess it was common practice for them to do that if there was a couple together. So we went ahead and we was talking about what had happened, just kind of briefly. More or less, I was afraid, and Charlie was still trying to calm me down because I just went through quite an experience on that. And Charlie was a good deal older. And everybody always thought Charlie and I was friends, but, we really weren't friends. I was friends with his children, like his son, his daughters. He had 2 sons and 2 daughters that we grew up with. My brother, we all played together. But I wasn't friends with Charlie because of the age difference. I had just really got to know Charlie as a human, as a code worker and all.
And you had rented a room from him. And so you had this kind of mentor-teenager relationship.
Exactly right. It wasn't like he was a friend or a father figure or something. I mean, I just always depended on him. We used to play together with his children, and, I was a little older, so I'd watch his, and we would just go fishing together. We always fished. Both our families would get together and go to the river and fish. and they'd fry fish and just spend the weekend somewhere camping out or something. And that was my relationship with Charlie. I was pretty fair friends with his oldest son, and matter of fact, every now and then I still see him, and we still fish together.
Well, in Chapter 5, The Secret Tape, you write, that famous secret tape has frequently been cited as proof that Charlie and me were not lying, that we truly believed we had been abducted by extraterrestrial creatures. It has been reported that we were placed in a jail cell that night, which contained a hidden microphone, and that our conversation was monitored. Actually, Charlie and I were never placed in a cell, but we were questioned in rooms at the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. And at one point, this was the third round, Charlie's interrogators excused themselves on the pretext of getting coffee, and Charlie and I were left in the office alone. So there's nobody else there. This is the first moment, right? That sitting on the pier. This is it for you to talk with Charles Hickson.
And I feel like they thought we was going to say something like, boy, we trying to pull one over on them, but we didn't. It really shocked them because I was almost in tears, talking about what was going on. And Charlie was scared. You're looking at a Korean veteran that's been through war and everything else, and Charlie was scared to death at this point himself. So I don't remember everything that was said in there. Of course, it's on tape, so it's documented. But I do remember being afraid and telling him, let's get the hell out of there. And when we got through, and that's more or less what they let us do, was get out.
Well, I wanted to share with our Phenomenon Radio audience some of that transcript, because the first thing on that recording is you saying, tell ya I'm scared to death. And then Charlie says, we need to get over there, and let me tell you, man, it's something that'll scare you damn near to death, And you say, if you hear about something like this, you can't believe it. And then, Calvin, you say, I reckon is something the United States would have up there. You're thinking that maybe what you've interacted with is something from our military?
I thought that for a little while, because we're right there by the shipyard, and Ingalls is a big government-run shipyard, more or less, because they do all the work on their ships and submarines. They're into building drones and stuff now. So, they had a lot of technology there. But come to find out, back in, they just repairing old battleships and starting to build a few new ones. And, they didn't have no kind of program like that going on, because I really checked into it, because it was going to really kind of tee me off if they had been.
Yeah, and then you say, I guess for radio I'll spell it. What's so DAMN bad about it is that nobody will believe it. And Charles say, yeah, and they could have done anything to us, but they didn't hurt me. And then you ask, well, I wonder why they picked us up. And then you remember, and you say, my DAMN arms, I remember my arms, they just froze, just like I couldn't move, like I'd stepped on a DAMN rattlesnake. Now, you say here, this is the transcript in that sheriff's office. This is what somebody who has the tape, and I understand the tape is in an archive now that people can go and listen to this, what I'm reading excerpts from the transcript. You say, I passed out. That is the first time I ever passed out in my life. Where do you remember in that process that you were talking to us about that you passed out? Because in your conscious recognition, you didn't remember passing out, that I recall.
No, I never did pass out. What happened, I got so weak when I first seen this thing. I like to have fainted, and when I was inside the craft, I said I couldn't turn my head or move nothing I just had to look to the side. And I was calling that more or less like passing out. You know, I didn't have any control on my body whatsoever.
Well, do you remember that you literally woke up on that craft? Is there a reason why you thought in the sheriff's office that you had passed out?
Well, like I say, I was paralyzed, and I wouldn't know what passing out was about. But I was conscious. I had my mental conscience, and I could see, and that's about all I could. And at one time, the pain might have got so bad, I don't know. It should have come out in the hypnosis, but the pain might have got so bad, I might have passed out for a second through that.
And you're telling Charlie in there in this 5-minute tape in the sheriff's office, I paralyzed right there. I couldn't move. And Charlie says, you know, one of these days they're going to believe this. They're going to believe it one of these days. I knew all along they was people from other worlds up there. I knew all along. I never thought it would happen to me. Do you remember him talking to you about that? I
do. And you know, different people handle things different. And I think that it scared Charlie so bad that, you know, he took it a little different than I did. Like I say, he was the kind of man that he'd been through a lot of stuff. And, you know, he was a good deal older, and I figured he could handle things different. But actually, I handled it better than him. I just got away from everybody. But he lived it after this.
Yeah.
As far as I know, he didn't. I don't know if he ever went back to work or anything else. I think he just traveled and talked about this and did a book.
I remember talking with J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer who worked for the Air Force back in the early 80s, and he told me that he really did think that you guys in Pascagoula, it was the real deal, that you were dealing with something that was not from this planet. And he told me that privately. I don't remember what he said publicly, but he told me that privately.
He went public before he left here. He came down and visited. Just right after this happened, him and Dr. Harder from the University of California. And he gave a press release then said, if these guys are acting, they need to be in Hollywood because they're the best I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what he said on a leaving note. And he told me, he said, I don't believe too many of these cases, but son, sit down here. I believe you, and we just have to see what happens from here. And it wasn't too long after that, you know, he died, so I didn't really get a chance to see him much.
Right. And did you ask him, to, you know, like eye to eye, face to face? You have a quote in one of your interviews that I wondered if you ask Alan this. I catch myself going fishing at night, and I look up and I wonder where they came from, and how far did they travel, and why had they come to get me? Did you talk with J. Allen Hynek about those questions?
We talked some about different things, but we really didn't cover that question right there. He didn't have enough time, I guess, when he came down. He just stayed a couple of days, and that 2 days that they were down, you know, they took us to the hospital. They took us to Keesler. We was busy and just wanting to get away from the press. The press wouldn't leave us alone then either. It was one right after another reporter, and I mean they'd barge in just Calvin, to get an interview.
I'm curious about two things. First of all, I want to ask you, when the press barged in and was talking to you, what kind of reaction did you get? I mean, from the press and from the people in the area, you know, that the press, when they reported on it, your friends and stuff, what kind of reaction did you get as far as your story then?
You know, everybody had a good reaction. My friends, my family. The only problem I had with the press, I think a lot of them believed, and it's like anything else, the people that's gonna believes you, and the ones that's not won't ever, or the ones that's open-minded might get a chance. But nobody really ever, like friends or family, wanted to question me about it. Matter of fact, I never talked to them about it, and they never questioned me. And matter of fact, I had a friend the other day, and we was over at his house, and we was sitting there. He said, "Calvin, I want to ask you something." He found out I was writing this book. He said, "We've sat here and told each other a many a lies, but I never heard you lie to me about that. You won't talk about it." I said, "Well, you're right. Buy the book and read it."
Okay, and another thing that I'm curious about before I ask about the medical exam, okay, was there prior to your incident or after your incident anything even similar to what happened to you in that area? Was there ever any talk of that, or had anything like that ever happened before or after your incident?
I had never heard of nothing. Of course, you got to remember back then, even if something had to happen, you had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and usually the president was up there lying about Cuba or something. So that was the only news that you could get. So we had no access to it. We lived far out in the country, and we wouldn't know what to do if we had seen one. We seen falling stars.
Right, but I mean, any locals or anybody come up to you afterwards or since and said, "Well, we had something strange like that happen"?
Now they are, but back then they wasn't. Nobody wanted to talk to me about it. One thing they all thought I was, and I did have a nervous breakdown and had to go in the hospital for a little while, but they didn't want to upset me because they knew I was really sincerely upset about all this. And I chose the way I choose to handle things. Unless I figure it out 100% and got a plan, I don't talk about nothing that I can't do nothing about.
Right. Now, I'd like to go further into what some of the other people may have had happen to, but you said you were taken to the doctors. What did they find?
Well, I was concerned that maybe we had bacteria and radiation on us, and I wanted to go that night and get checked. I kept telling Charlie, "Look, we don't need to go around anybody because if there's something wrong, we could spread the disease or something to everybody, or we got radiation, we could spread that around," because I didn't know that much about it. But anyhow, so he thought, "Well, we'll take care of that tomorrow." And I was thinking to myself, it might not be no tomorrow to take care of this. So when we got back to the apartment, I stripped all my clothes off, my shoes, everything I had, I put in a garbage bag. I tied it up, and I went in there and took a shower, and I took that to the dumpster and threw it away. So that's how concerned I was about something being wrong. So the next day, the guy that we worked for made arrangements. He got an attorney down, and the reason he done that because there was so much legal stuff going. So the shipyard had basically shut down because the press kept calling, and you couldn't get a phone call in or out or nothing else. So he made arrangements that we could go to the hospital and then go to Keesler and get checked for radiation. So while we was at the hospital, they checked us for different things, did blood work, checked their cuts or scratches or bruises and all that, documented it all, which I wish I had all them records, and I tried to get them, but we had Katrina come down here on the coast, and about 80% of the coast was destroyed. And back then, they didn't keep accurate records like they did.
Hello.
Right. Did they find anything? Did they tell you anything?
Well, I had some scratches and bruises, and they got the blood work in and all. But as far as I know, they didn't find nothing on that area except for the puncture on my arm where I felt like I had some kind of injection. And then they checked that, and I never did hear nothing from the blood work.
Calvin, in Bud's hypnosis, you are saying that this female, long and she had thin fingers, long, thin, but she's putting her finger up my nose, and Bud says, does it feel like she's inserting something? And you seem to indicate possibly, and then you said, and she has something in her hand. She takes the thing down my nose, around my nose, and she's reaching for my lip. And she pulls my lip up, and I feel a stinging, and my blood pressure, I don't know what it is. I can't catch my breath. I'm bleeding, and my lip is bleeding, and I remember my prayer. And then the blood just starts rolling. It rolls my face. She grabs me by the side of the face, and all I could think of was killing her, but I knew that I was going to die in there. That everything just settled down and lowered back. Now, did you tell them at the hospital about this insertion in your nose, and did anybody look to see if you had an implant ever?
I tried not to tell them no more. They seen scratches and bruises, and I chalked that up to work, because we worked around hot metal, and I just said, well, I got them working. I didn't want to bring any more attention on this than what I had to. But it got so bad that, later on when I went to see Bud, that, I had to know something. I feel like maybe they might have injected something a long time before this, and they come back to retrieve it. Now, I don't know that for sure, but that's the way I kind of feel.
Did you have any strange things happen when you were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old?
Not really. We lived in a small house, so my brother and I used to share a room together because we didn't have enough rooms. And he would tell me sometime, he'd start screaming and hollering. He'd say, there's a ghost standing over by you. Well, I didn't pay him no attention. And he said, she was blowing in your ear. And one night I really actually felt something blowing in my ear, and it scared me. So I called him in there, and I said, Mama, there's a ghost blowing in my ear. And she just laughed it off. But my brother said it really was. And I talked to him even up until the day he died. We was talking about that. And he really believed sincerely that it might have been some kind of being or something in there then that was checking us out.
And he said, yeah, go ahead.
He said they didn't think you ever messed with him, but.
Well, do you think that your father's work for the Atomic Energy Commission and being on that Project Dribble about underground nuclear bomb tests might have had anything to do with drawing attention of some kind of other intelligence from somewhere else in the cosmos to you, to your family, because of what your father did? That comes up in a lot of abductions where the father or the mother worked for our government. That's why I ask.
No, ma'am, I don't feel like it did. I think just being in a country boy out there where it's accessible to get a hold of somebody, and the fact that we was off to ourselves and just easy targets was probably what it was. But I don't believe that was nothing to do with that.
And the blue lights. John, can you explain to Calvin what you have seen, and that the colors seem sort of similar, like the sky blue that's darker?
I'm sorry, Linda, say that again?
I wondered if you could explain to Calvin the blue lights that you saw at Rendlesham, and they have played sort of a control role in your mind. And it reminds me of the color that he and Charles Hickson described as being like the sky blue, but darker.
Well, right, but for me, I mean, my memories don't really come from, as far as for me, I saw something and I drew the picture, but all my memories from the lights actually come out under hypnosis more than, you were there for one session, Linda. So I mean, yeah, there was blue lights there.
I've been at 7 of your hypnosis sessions.
Well, I mean, different. We did, yeah, you're right. We did 2 different people. But what I'm saying is I don't remember that much interaction. Like, he just explains stuff, he just remembers it. You know what I mean? It's boom, 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 boom. This happened, that happened, that's happened. Where I don't have that kind of memories. But then under hypnosis, it's different. So, I mean, what was your effect with these blue lights? What did you feel? What did you remember the interaction with them, Calvin?
Well, the first ones, I just felt like it was off a patrol car and they was there to arrest us. But when they opened the door, that was so bright, and I was wondering why was it so bright on the inside of the craft, and if it was like that all the time, and how they functioned and got around. Because I know that if I was on that 24/7, that light would drive me crazy, because it didn't look like they could turn them off. They looked like they just stayed. It was in the walls.
Oh, yeah. And the blue lights, because you saw those blue lights come out again when those 3 big robotic, whatever they are, started coming out of the door. You saw those blue lights again.
I did. Now, on one end of the craft, it looked kind of like a couple of little portholes. And that might have been the lights itself there for some reason. And why they would want to make themselves notice like that, I wouldn't know. But it's nothing nobody could do, even if they'd seen them and catch them.
Well, I do have a question for you, Calvin. Okay. A lot of research has been done, and there's stuff going now with UAPs and the light effect and everything. Are you sure it was a craft? I mean, or did it appear to you as a craft and you went into it? You know what I'm saying? Are you 100% sure? Did you touch it or feel it or know there was something hard, or like a surface there? Or did, in your own mind, you just assumed it was a craft?
No, I was 100% sure. It was no doubt in my mind about it. And one of the things that I realized about this, it was hovering off the ground. I didn't see no legs under it to support it. It was just, they set a couple of foot off the ground, and that's the way that it was. It was just sitting there hovering.
But did you touch it?
No, not going in or coming out.
Okay, but did you feel like you were walking on a hard surface? Because you said you floated the whole time.
I did float all the time.
So, I mean, what I'm trying to get to is that...
I know.
You get descriptions of people say it's a craft, but then this phenomenon supposedly can affect you to make you believe what you want to believe it is. But some people say, well, I touched it, I walked on it, or whatever. But in this case, you never walked on it, you never touched it, but you are 100% sure it was a craft and not like lights making your mind think it was a craft.
No, I knew it was for some reason. And then the thing that really got me, I said they had laid me on a table, but I didn't feel a table. I don't know if I was suspended or laying on a table. So I didn't feel like I needed to be touching nothing in there, but I felt like I was in something that was solid.
Did she touch you? Yeah, John, I was just going. Did she touch you so you could feel pressure or temperature?
Pressure. I really didn't feel no temperature, change. But by that time, I was sweating and boiling and everything else, because when you get scared, you get this adrenaline rolling in you, and you're not going to feel as much as what you would if you don't have this adrenaline.
Right.
Did you, now, I'm not trying to get off your description of it, but you talked about 2 things that happened when you were visited. You said you were medically looked at. Okay, now you said immediately after the incident you were, but then you were re-looked at again medically, and you went to Keesler. Can you go into details what they were looking for medically and what happened to Keesler?
I can. Medically, they were supposed to be doing blood work and looking for bacteria, checking to see if we had any broken bones or anything that didn't look right on us. And then Keesler, they was looking for radiation. Now, like I say, they had all these records at this hospital down here, but we had the hurricane, and they didn't back nothing up on computers back in. They just had soft copies of things,
right.
And everything flooded.
So they didn't find any radiation then.
No, they didn't find any radiation. I remember pulling up to the door. There was probably 5 or 10 people out there in little suits, and we got out and they threw the Geiger counters on us. And when they got through, they said they clear. And I do remember them saying that. Then they said they wanted to see y'all inside. So they walked us down a long hall. And when we got in there, you know, it was several people sitting around a conference table. And they told us to sit down. And they talked to us a little bit. Of course, we described what had happened. And somebody said, okay, that's all we need. Thank you. And somebody escorted us out the door.
So you never got any results back on your blood work?
No, I didn't. Now, they might have been some results come back, but it never made it to me.
Okay, well, explain this to me then. I'm sorry. I understand that the person who came and saw you was from Project Blue Book, correct?
Dr. Alan Hynek, yes.
Right. Okay. What drew him down there in the first place? And you say he was really nice to you, but I mean, it's a little confusing to me. What brought him down there to you in the first place? What made him think to take you to the hospital in Keesler? And then after they did all that, then nothing was followed up with you. That kind of, I'm looking for an explanation on all that from the beginning of what caused him to reach out to you and what happened from that point and why no follow-up.
Dr. Hynek came down on his own dime. I have no idea why he flew down because I didn't invite him or talk to him, or nobody did. Him and Dr. John Allen Harder just showed up there out of the blue. But by then, it was out in the press, and I guess he felt like he needed to come investigate it.
Did they go to the site ever?
I'm sure they did. I didn't hang around to talk to them. As soon as everybody let me go, I hauled my butt back to Laurel.
But they came to see you, and they took you down, but he never once asked for you to go out there and show him what happened or describe it?
Yeah, but I never wanted to go out and describe it or nothing. They had talked about going out there, and like I say, the one thing I didn't want was media attention, and I had no idea who he was. As far as I was concerned, he was a funny-looking little guy come there with a beard on and an education, and my little redneck self didn't like that. I didn't want nobody talking to me that seemed a lot smarter than I was, because a lot of times people with big educations, they look down on you and over-talk you, but you know, I wasn't going to let that happen because I didn't let the news media do it.
Cal, wasn't Charlie then, as I remember talking with Alan, it was Charlie Hickson that he then talked with the most, and it was because you didn't want to talk with anybody. You didn't want to be photographed, nothing. It was why Charlie Hickson ended up being the person who interfaced with the world and with J. Allen Hynek, right?
That's right. I figured Charlie had a grip on it, and I didn't want the publicity, and I made that well known to start with. And if you start in a situation like this, if you start talking to people and telling people about it and all, then you end up getting caught up in the loop. And I think that's what happened to Charlie, why he had to stay in it, because he put himself in that position to talk about it all the time. So, you know, I wasn't accessible to him. And if y'all go through the newspaper clippings, there was one place where a reporter come up, snapped a picture of me with a camera, and I took the camera away from him, throwed it on the ground, throwed my finger in the place, and told him I was going to beat the living out of him if he didn't go on and get out of my face.
So you were not media friendly, but I remember, see, Hynek, who I came to meet him in the early 80s. This is it was 73, so it would have been about 7, 8, 9 years after your experience down in Pascagoula. And Hynek at that point had already left the work that he had once upon a time done with Project Blue Book for the Air Force, because Hynek became Well, I'll just tell you, he was disgusted. He was embarrassed that he had become a mouthpiece for the Air Force. These are his words to me. And that's why it was J. Allen Hynek, the astronomer who had taught at Ohio State University and Northwestern. He left his consulting role with the Air Force and founded the Center for UFO Studies in Chicago. And it would have been in that capacity, I believe, that he would have come to see you.
And I would have talked to him in that capacity, but I didn't. Everybody was saying at the shipyard, somebody from the government's coming down to check this out and all. Last thing I want is the government checking on me, because they can't take care of their own business, much less mine. So, you know, I love my country, and I'd die for it in a minute, but I'm not going to let them come push me around.
Well, let me ask you a question from the October 11th, 1973 incident, which was really quite dramatic in terms of the hypnosis session with Bud that's laid out in your new book. Many pages of transcript with many surprises in it. Usually people who have interactions with this other intelligence, an alien intelligence, within a short period of time, it can be 2 to 3 weeks, and then periodically, sometimes for the rest of their life, they will have very, very dramatic and vivid dreams in which the beings or lights or telepathy or symbols or hieroglyphs will come into their mind in the dreams, giving them more information beyond what happened on the encounter date. Has anything like that happened with you?
Let me tell you something strange that did happen. Of course, I love fishing, and I got up one morning and I decided to go fishing on the islands. So I jumped in my boat. My wife made me a lunch. I got in my boat and I told her, I said, I'll be back at 3 o'clock this evening, or, you know, somewhere before dark, I'll be back. Well, I got out to the island and I was fishing. Then the next thing I remember, waking up, and it was about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was dark when I come to, and I couldn't figure out what had happened. I had no clue. And that's where I knew that Bud Hopkins had wrote a book, Missing Time, right. And I had to find out about it. And that's how I ended up going to see Bud, because I was missing a lot of time from about 1 o'clock that evening. That was the last time I should have been there, you know, fishing. And then it was 3 or 4 the next morning before I knew what was going on. I hadn't even eaten my lunch, and that's unusual.
So you had a missing time of approximately 12 hours, let's say 10 or 12. And did Bud find out anything about what happened in that missing time that is different from the October 11th, 1973 encounter with the 3 big robots and that strange female?
Well, like I said the other day when we was talking, I try not to read this hypnosis session, because I want to remember it as I remember it, and then as I remember, I try to read a little bit. So I hadn't got to my memory that far yet enough to read that much. That's going to be a new part in the book that I hadn't read. So
you do not have any idea on August 16th of 2018 about what happened in 10 to 12 hours of missing time on yet a different fishing trip?
I have no idea, no ma'am. I would love to know. I'd like to know what went on. And it might be in the tapes. I don't know. But I'm not going to read them and find out that way, because I don't want somebody putting a bunch of stuff in my head. Now, I know after I got to trust Bud Hopkins, because I didn't take it lightly going down there to talk to him. I checked him out. I checked him out with different people, and I figured he would be one that would be a straight shooter with you, and that's what I wanted. And I got to know him on a personal basis, and you know, I got to trust him, Bud, or I never would have let him hypnotize me.
Well, what is it that Bud became afraid of?
I don't know. He, like I say, he regressed me. He knows what went on. Him and two more people that was in the room there. It was my friend and his wife, and recently I've lost touch with him because I wanted to talk to him before I done this book, and I couldn't find him. I paid all these search deals that you can find on the internet to find somebody, and it's just like he disappeared off the world. So he might have passed away because he was a good deal older. But I don't know. And I don't want to read in there and find out right now. I just don't want to go that far with it.
Well, Calvin, we talked in the first hour about how this light shows up and the female seems to be wanting to get away from it, that the light seems to come and challenge the female that you are sensing is evil. And then you say, under hypnosis, I feel a really warm sensation, the best feeling I ever had in my life. Thank God I'm finally dead. I'm dead, and my soul is leaving my body. She's actually killed me. My soul's leaving my body. In this light, this strong light, I'm glad it's all over. I'll finally get some peace. And then I see angels nothing like I have ever seen before. I'm being pulled back down now. I'm being pulled back into my body by these angels. I don't want to go back into my body. I just want to leave. I want to go into that light. It just felt so good. Let me go back into this light. Don't send me back. Lord, please take me, take me. Let me come to you. I don't want to go back, but I have to go back. I have to fight her. I have to individually hunt her down and her kind. And this is just a thought that has come into my head. Do you have inner thoughts about that now?
I do. Like I say, I think it's a time that I was kind of looked into the future there a little bit, and I was in the process of getting married. And I felt like my family, I had a wife and a daughter, and, I felt like that I needed to protect them and my brother and my mothers, my fathers, my sisters, and my friends. I don't know, I just felt the urge that I would need to protect them, although I didn't have many friends back in. But,
protect them from what? That's what I wonder, if you have any deeper wisdom now about what might have been taking place in that ship where you had a sense of something bad and then something powerful in the light shows up.
I feel like, and I really feel this from the bottom of my heart, that people's destroying this world, and there's going to be starvation, there's going to be wars and things like that. And somebody has to kind of help pull a certain amount of people together to survive all that, so you can kind of reseed the earth. I don't know. I feel like there's a purpose, and I hadn't fulfilled it yet, because it would be easier for me to just go ahead and die and be out of everybody's way and than it would to hang on sometime, because it's been a hard road, a really hard road. So I don't know what the purpose is yet, but I'll figure it out.
John, have you had any sense about this time of 2018 to 2020 from Bentwaters? Because Cal told me that he felt that this was, 2018 was the year of release for him to speak, right, Cal?
Exactly.
And John, I'm just curious, if you, hearing his words, does it resonate with any sense you have about now?
Well, all I'm curious about is I'm watching how this is moving forward with the Space Force, what To the Stars is trying to do. And, maybe hearings and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's one or two things going on. It's either going to be they're moving forward to this because we're going to have some kind of war, within our own planet, and they now have the technology to control space or above, and they're racing to do that so we can continue to try to destroy ourselves. Or maybe there's some kind of other threat that they feel is coming or going to happen. But do I think something is coming in the future? Well, you just have to look at the way the government's reacting right now as far as wanting the Space Force in place by 2020 and the way everything, the race for space is going on. Something's in the cards. I'm just not sure what it is yet.
And Calvin may not know that when John was engulfed in light twice at the R.A.F. Bentwaters Rendlesham Forest, that under hypnosis in 1988, which was 8 years after the event, the hypnotherapist asked John, do you see any life forms in the lights? And John's answer was, the light is the life form. Right, John?
Correct. I did. And that would be a good question. Maybe you can answer yourself. Where did you feel what was the main life form there? Were they being controlled by something? What was going on with all this is in your mind, Calvinist? Who was in charge? Who was controlling this? And what was their inner mission? What do you think they were trying to do?
I don't know. That's a hard one right there. But I do feel like we'll know the answer soon.
Why?
I just got that feeling. You ever just had a gut feeling about something?
Well, in that gut feeling, what do you think could happen?
Well, we either going to get a grip on things, or God will destroy this earth, or let them destroy it in every way that can, and it's going to be terrible when that happens.
Could ETs have an interest? Could ETs have a self-interest in making sure that Earth survives as a laboratory no matter what happens to humans?
I think so. We're about to run out of planets. There's a lot of planets that you look around that are destroying themselves. And, I know it's still a lot left, but, if Earth might be a jumping point to get to somewhere else that they're going, I don't know. I feel like sometimes it's all interdimensional, that they don't travel by spaceships no more, that they, if you look to your right and you could see it, I think that it's another dimension right here that they kind of travel through.
Which is what physicists are writing about and talking about today more and more. Did that come to you in a dream or from interacting with that female, or where did you get that idea?
It came a lot from interacting with a female, and then I dreamed about it several times. And what did she communicate about other dimensions? She didn't, but there was a little period of time in there where I knew her thoughts. That's strange, but I knew what she was thinking the same way that she could read mine, I guess, when she connected up. And I could see other dimensions where they could just walk through and get into a different world, or be in the same world we are, but in different dimensions and different times. So it's just really hard to explain.
I understand, Calvin, and unfortunately we're out of time. I want to thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Calvin, very, very much. And God bless you for sharing your story now in 2018 going forward.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it, and I wouldn't mind coming back when I get something figured out here.
All right. Well, you call. We'll have you on Phenomenon Radio. Thank you. Race, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Calvin. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Next week on Phenomenon Radio, Dr. Richard Obowsey will join the show. And that's one you don't want to miss. He's a physicist, a very interesting guy. We'll have more posted on social media all week long about the upcoming guest. And for John Burroughs, for Linda Moulton Howe, for our very honored guest, we are so thankful to Calvin Parker for coming on the show. I want to say thanks to you for listening. Stay tuned for 3 more hours of live programming right here on KGRA with Jimmy Church and Fade to Black. We're KGRAradio.com.